My wife and her family planned, Operation Divorce, for 6 months, to evict me on our 10th anniversary. Instead, I flipped their plan in one night. After 10 years of marriage with Lydia, I believed we had something substantial. We met in college, married young, and created what I thought was a good life together. She works in marketing. I'm a software developer. We have some decent money between us. Her family was constantly active, perhaps too involved, but I assumed it came with marrying into a close-knit bunch. Her sisters, Marissa and Talia, as well as her mother Vivian, are constantly bothering us, but I put up with it because I loved Lydia. What I didn't realize was how much they all disliked me. I helped Lydia set up her new iPhone 3 weeks ago. She had been moaning about how slow her old one was, so she finally updated. While importing her apps and data, I logged into her iCloud to ensure that everything was correctly synced. She was in the shower when her laptop screen filled up with notifications. I believed it was work-related because she was constantly besieged with mails. But then I noticed a WhatsApp notification from Operation Divorce Dan. My name is Daniel. I opened WhatsApp in the browser and discovered a group chat with Lydia, Marissa, Talia and Vivian. The messages made my blood run cold, but I continued reading because I wanted to know what I was dealing with. Marissa wrote, "He is so foolish." Talia replied, "I already called the moving company. We can clear his stuff while he's at work Thursday. Everything goes to storage unit 247 on 5th Street. Mom got the key yesterday." Vivian chimed in, "My lawyer friend has the divorce papers ready. Dan will be served right at the party. He'll be homeless by 6 p.m. Can't wait to see his face." Lydia had sent a laughing emoji and added, "We should film it for TikTok. Watch this loser get what he deserves. 10 years of pretending to love this pathetic man, and I can finally be free." I screenshotted everything, every message dated back months. They'd been planning this for half a year, and it was perfectly timed for our anniversary, which I believed we were celebrating on Saturday. Lydia's surprise party turned out to be my own eviction and divorce ambush. The mails showed a lot more. They discussed how they had always regarded me as beneath their family. Lydia only married me because she was pregnant her senior year, which I had no idea about because she miscarried early and never discussed the reason for our short engagement. How they had been waiting for the proper time to fully ruin me. Marissa suggested that I was very comfortable and needed to be brought down a few pegs. Talia mentioned how they wanted me to lose everything so that I would understand my station. Vivian started calling me worthless and saying her daughter deserved more than any unknown programmer. They had everything planned out. Lydia planned to appear normal all week and then invite me to what I assumed was our anniversary dinner on Saturday evening. Instead, I'd walk into a room filled with divorce papers and moving boxes, and they'd all be filming my reaction for social media. They intended to thoroughly humiliate me. What they don't realize is that I've been expecting something like this for a while. Not exactly, but I've noticed the coldness, the way people look at me during family gatherings, and the pause and hushed talks when I enter a room. I've been quietly preparing for years to ensure that I was financially and legally secured if Lydia ever tried to leave me with nothing. See, I'm not the stupid nothing coder people believe I am. I've been building fortune through investments and side projects that they have no idea about. I only have assets in my name. They have never considered backup plans and are utterly unaware of links. While they have been planning for 6 months, I have been deliberately placing myself for 4 years. I've spent the last 3 weeks pretending normal and taking screenshots of every new communication they send. They keep adding elements to their plan, getting more enthusiastic for Saturday. Lydia even asked me what time I wanted to depart for our special dinner yesterday, and I couldn't keep a straight face when I realized what she meant. Which storage unit did they rent? I know just where it is. Who is the lawyer that Vivian mentioned? I've already completed my research. What about the moving company Talia hired? They're going to face some unexpected challenges tomorrow. Tonight is Friday. Tomorrow at 7 p.m., I'm meant to stroll into my own surprise party, but I have some surprises of my own that they won't expect. I've been preparing for this moment for longer than they have planned to destroy me. And by Sunday night, all 3 of these women will know precisely what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. Update 1. Holy crap, Reddit. Yesterday was completely chaotic, and I'm still processing everything that happened. Thank you to everyone who commented on my initial post. Some of you predicted precisely what was going to happen. Saturday morning began normally enough. Lydia was acting especially kind, possibly thinking she was being clever. She served me breakfast and kept mentioning how eager she was for our special evening. She even brought up particular memories from our wedding, telling me how much she loved me and how excited she was to commemorate our 10th anniversary. The entire time, I'm watching her execute this act, knowing exactly what she expects to happen in a few hours. Every smile was artificial. Every kiss felt like betrayal. And every nice word was only part of her elaborate deceit. It took everything I had not to confront her right there and then. Around 2 p.m., she mentioned that she wanted to run errands to prepare for tonight. She claimed she needed to pick up flowers and visit the restaurant to confirm our reservation. Perfect timing. As soon as she went, I made my first move. Here's what I didn't say in the original post. Which storage unit did they rent? It's under my name. Talia utilized my credit card information from the time I helped her move last year. She still had my information preserved and assumed I'd never notice a storage rental charge, but I watch every transaction on every account I own. And I've been watching that unit for weeks. What made this even better was that over my 3 weeks of monitoring their chat, I discovered they had been relocating my belongings gradually, not all at once, but piece by piece while I was at work. They believed they were being clever by stealing stuff I wouldn't notice straight away. My old college textbooks, some tools from the garage, and winter gear I won't need for months. They had the entire system worked out. Talia would text when all was clear. Marissa would bring her SUV, and they'd load whatever they could fit. They photographed everything and kept notes of what they had taken and what was still to be grabbed. I drove directly there and cleared it out. Every box and piece of furniture had previously been moved. I had my own truck and relocated everything to a place across town that they will never discover. I changed the locks on their unit and prepaid for 6 months in my name solely. But this is where things become interesting. I didn't just shift my belongings. I replaced them. I packed their storage unit with everything from my home office that I'd been meaning to get rid of for years. Old broken devices, out-of-date computer equipment, and mountains of useless documents. It appeared as if someone had been there and cleared out valuable objects, leaving behind evident garbage. Then I went home to wait. Lydia returned around 5 p.m. with Marissa and Talia. They were all giggly and thrilled, as if they were about to pull off the ideal ambush. Vivian arrived at 6:30 with a manila packet, which I assumed contained the divorce papers. Lydia told me around 7 p.m. that it was time to leave for our anniversary dinner. We got into my car, and she told me to drive to Marissa's place. When we pulled up, I noticed movement through the windows and knew this was it. Lydia stated that she wanted to pop over briefly to pick up something. When we stepped in the door, they were all standing there with huge grins on their faces. Vivian stepped forward with the packet, and Marissa pulled out her phone, evidently ready to record. That's when I spoke the words I'd been practicing for 3 weeks. Before you start filming, you might want to check storage unit 247. Lydia turned absolutely white. Talia truly dropped her phone. Marissa began to inquire what I meant, but I could see the panic rising. I told them about Operation Divorce Dan. I was aware of every message, plan, and detail that they had spent months putting together. I took out my phone and began reading their own statements back to them. The room exploded. Lydia instantly began yelling that I had breached her privacy and that I was insane for spying on her intimate discussions. Vivian demanded to know how I had gained access to sensitive family chats. Marissa started calling me ill and manipulating. But here's what made the entire event so amazing. They could not deny what they had stated. Every hateful word, every plan to embarrass me, and every insult they'd hurled at me for months was right there in black and white. Lydia tried to say that they were simply venting and that they never intended to carry out any of it. But I had screenshots from yesterday of Talia confirming the moving truck rental and Vivian discussing serving me papers tonight. The disagreement lasted over an hour and turned heated. Talia insisted that I deserved everything they had planned because I had been a slacker for years, holding Lydia back. She said I was dead weight, and Lydia could have married someone successful if she hadn't been stuck with me. Marissa told me I was pathetic and that their family had never wanted me there, that they had been hoping Lydia would wake up for years. But Vivian, she became really angry. She began telling me that I had no idea who I was dealing with, that her family had connections and resources I couldn't fathom, and that I'd made a tremendous mistake believing I could outwit them. She kept talking about how they might ruin my life, how they had means of punishing anyone who crossed them. Lydia was torn between trying to deny everything and being upset that I'd invaded her private. She claimed at first that the messages were simply harmless venting between family members. The next minute, she was shouting that I was a controlling freak with no right to listen in on her private talks. That's when I informed them that the storage container had been cleared out, that the moving firm they had engaged would arrive Monday to an empty space, and that every aspect of their ideal plan had already come apart. I also revealed a few other information I'd kept private, such as how I'd been recording our chats for the past 2 weeks using an app on my phone. How I documented each time Lydia lied to me about her plans. how I had been constructing a case demonstrating their conspiracy to cheat me. The screaming match that ensued was spectacular. Lydia accused me of stealing from them, despite the fact that it was my own possessions. Talia began demanding that I tell them where I had relocated everything. Marissa threatened to contact the cops. Vivian escalated, claiming she was going to ruin my career and that she had people who could ensure I never worked in technology again. She was raving about how her late husband had amassed a tremendous network and how she could financially and professionally destroy me. So I called their bluff. I took out my phone and called 911 right in front of them. When the operator answered, I explained that I wanted to report identity theft and credit card fraud, and that I had evidence proving that someone had used my financial information to rent storage space without my knowledge. They shut up quickly. I assured the operator that I had fixed the immediate situation, so the police did not come out. But the point has been made. They were aware that everything they had done may be used against them legally. I drove home, leaving them standing there. Lydia rode back in utter silence, likely attempting to think out her next move. When we arrived inside, Mother walked straight to our bedroom and closed the door. I could hear her on the phone with someone, most likely one of her sisters, but couldn't understand what she was saying. About an hour later, she returned and attempted an entirely different technique. She suddenly apologized, stating the group conversation was merely family drama and she never meant any of it. She claimed her sisters had pressed her into agreeing to their plan, and she had been trying to find a way out. She stated she loved me and wanted to work things out, and that we could go to counseling to repair our marriage. She even proposed that we repeat our vows and have a proper celebration of our 10 years together. I listened to every word but did not believe a single one. This woman had spent months preparing to publicly humiliate me. She had described me as miserable and worthless to her family. They had planned to have me served with divorce papers as entertainment for their social media. But here's the thing, Reddit. This was only the introductory shot. They believe that losing storage access and having their plot exposed is the worst I can do to them. They believe Lydia can sweet-talk her way out of this, and things will return to normal. They have no notion what happens next. See, while they spent months arranging Operation Divorce Dan, I spent years preparing for something similar. I have financial tactics they are unaware of, legal protections they have never considered, and contingency plans for events they cannot even envision. Remember how I indicated in my first post that I was accumulating wealth through investments and side projects? There's a lot more to the story. For the past 4 years, I have been actively defending myself from this type of family manipulation. Every asset, account, and legal document has been constructed to prevent them from destroying my finances. The storage unit switch was simply me letting them know I wasn't the stupid, defenseless victim they assumed I was. The real pressure hasn't even begun yet. Monday morning will be pretty intriguing for all three of these women. Let's just say Vivian's claims about having connections and riches are going to be challenged in ways she never expected. Update 2. I promised you that these women would have an exciting Monday morning. That was an understatement. First, let me address some of the criticisms from my previous update. Yes, some of you say I should have just walked away and started over, but that would have meant allowing them to continue believing they could ruin people without consequences. These women spent months plotting to publicly humiliate me and render me homeless for their pleasure. Monday began early. Lydia departed for work about 7:30 a.m., still trying to pretend that everything was normal between us. She even kissed me goodbye and expressed her desire that when she returned home, we might chat further about mending our marriage. I simply nodded and encouraged her to have a good day. At 8 a.m. sharp, I made my initial move. See, during my 4 years of preparation, I wasn't just accumulating wealth and protecting assets. I'd been studying everything I could about each member of this family, including their employment, finances, responsibilities, and stress areas. Information is power, and I had been gathering it meticulously. These women thought they knew everything about me, but they had never taken the time to learn about my abilities. They observed a quiet coder who didn't create a fuss at family events, so they felt I was weak and controllable. Lydia works for a small marketing firm that runs social media campaigns for local businesses. What she doesn't realize is that I've been providing web development services to 3 of their largest clients for the past 2 years, not through her company, but directly with the business owners. At 8 a.m., I emailed detailed offers to all 3 clients, proposing to manage their whole digital presence in-house for substantially less than they are presently paying her company. By 9:15 a.m., I'd signed contracts with 2 of them and received verbal commitments from the third. Lydia's firm lost 60% of their income in 90 minutes. Marissa works as a rental property manager for a company that manages approximately 40 apartment units throughout town. What she doesn't realize is that I knew her supervisor Brandon from college. We weren't close friends, but we maintained loose contact via LinkedIn. At 10 a.m., I called Brandon and informed him that I needed to discuss a severe issue with one of his employees. I outlined how Marissa had been exploiting company resources for personal vendettas, notably her access to tenant information and management systems to orchestrate harassment campaigns against family members. I never accused her of anything criminal. I only presented the facts. Marissa had used her work computer to look at storage options for their Operation Divorce Dan. She had planned personal activities during working hours, including moving truck coordination. She'd even utilized the business vehicle for several of their relocation excursions. Brandon took this extremely seriously. By noon, Marissa was in a meeting with HR to discuss her inappropriate use of company resources and violation of privacy policies. Talia came next, and she was the easiest target. Talia works part-time in a dentist office and relies on weekend catering engagements to make ends meet. She's established a solid reputation for hosting small events and parties around town. What makes this excellent is that the majority of her clients book her based on social media recommendations and word-of-mouth referrals. I spent Monday afternoon writing elaborate social media postings about my recent anniversary celebrations. Nothing malicious, nothing that may land me in legal trouble. Just candid accounts of how specific local service providers let me down at what should have been a special occasion. I detailed how a food organizer I'd hired for a family function was surreptitiously conspiring with relatives to ruin the event. I sent copies of her own messages describing her efforts to disrupt our celebration. I marked every local event planning organization, wedding venue, and party supply store in town. I posted to all of the community Facebook groups where people frequently inquired for catering recommendations. By Tuesday morning, Talia had lost 3 future weekend engagements and received several communications from potential clients indicating that they had decided to use alternative caterers. But Vivian was the major attraction. Remember how she repeatedly threatened me with her connections and resources? How did she imply that her late husband had established a network of strong people capable of destroying me financially and professionally? So I decided to test those connections. See, Vivian's husband used to own a small construction company before passing away 5 years ago. She maintained the business name and license valid after his death, despite the fact that she no longer undertakes construction work. She occasionally utilizes it for tax considerations and to retain corporate credibility in social situations. What she does not realize is that having an active business license entails specific legal obligations and reporting requirements. And if you are not actually executing commercial operations, there may be issues with licensing boards and regulatory organizations. On Tuesday afternoon, I filed formal complaints with both the State Contractor Licensing Board and the local Business Regulatory Office. I recorded how the company appears to be idle despite having active licensing, expressed concerns about potential misrepresentation to regulatory organizations, and demanded official investigations into its operations. Again, nothing unlawful on my part, just a concerned citizen with reasonable queries about business compliance and licensing procedures. But this is when things become really fascinating. By Wednesday morning, all 3 ladies had begun to panic. Lydia returned home on Tuesday night, upset, because her supervisor had called an emergency meeting to discuss their client losses. Marissa was facing a formal investigation at work and probable dismissal. Talia was desperately trying to repair her reputation while her weekend earnings vanished. And Vivian had received official notices from 2 distinct regulatory bodies demanding information about her business operations and informing her of upcoming compliance checks. On Wednesday evening, they all arrived at my place together. This time, there was no faking sweetness or pretending everything was all right. They were enraged and desperate for answers. Lydia screamed that I was destroying innocent people's livelihoods because of a petty family squabble. She insisted that her co-workers would lose their employment as a result of my vengeful behavior. Marissa insisted that I call Brandon and inform him that everything I had reported was false. She was worrying since she needed her job to pay for her car and housing, and she couldn't afford to be jobless. Talia cried and begged me to remove the social media posts because she couldn't afford to lose her catering income. She stated that her rent was due next week and that she planned to pay it with weekend bookings. But Vivian was different. She stopped begging and threatening. She was calculating, attempting to determine how much I knew and what I was going to do next. She asked me clearly what I wanted and what it would take for me to quit. She claimed they had learned their lesson and would leave me alone if I stopped targeting their employment and businesses. That's when I revealed the truth. This was not about teaching them a lesson or convincing them to leave me alone. This was about teaching them what happens when you try to destroy someone who has spent years training to protect himself. I informed them that what they had lost so far was only the beginning. that I'd spent 4 years gathering the tools and connections to defend myself against exactly what they'd attempted to do to me. And now they'd know directly what it's like to have someone ruin the life they've made. Vivian asked what I wanted, what they could do to put an end to this. I informed her that there was nothing they could do. They had made their decision to plan Operation Divorce Dan. They would now have to face the consequences. That's when she said something that helped things fall into place. She told me I had no clue what I was up against, that their family had been dealing with troublemakers like me for decades, and that I was about to find out why people in this town knew not to cross them. She claimed that they'd been sheltering Lydia from making mistakes her entire life, and that marrying me was the biggest mistake she'd ever done. They'd spent 10 years watching me keep their daughter from reaching her full potential, and they weren't about to let me ruin her future. Finally, I realized why they disliked me so much. It was more than just feeling inferior to them. They truly believed that by simply existing in Lydia's life, I was ruining it. From their perspective, I was the impediment to their kid reaching her full potential. They considered me as a burden, preventing her from having the prosperous husband she deserved. In their minds, Operation Divorce Dan was not cruelty, but rather an intervention. However, recognizing their motivation did not change anything. If anything, it made me more determined to demonstrate them how mistaken they had been about who was truly in charge here. I informed them that everything they'd seen so far was only a preview of what the full consequences would be like. That every step I'd made had been thoughtful and intentional, with the goal of addressing the exact issues that each of them was most concerned about. Friday morning, they'll all receive a very special delivery that will make everything I've done thus far appear like practice rounds. Because they still don't realize that I'm not attempting to teach them a lesson or get them to apologize. I'm gradually undermining the cushy life they've established while preparing to destroy mine. And we are just getting started. Final update. This is my final update. What transpired over the weekend was exactly what I had been working toward for 4 years. Friday morning arrived, and my promised special delivery was exactly on time. At 9 a.m., suddenly, 3 different process servers appeared at 3 distinct addresses. Lydia was served at her office, in front of her co-workers. Marissa was in her apartment building, where all her neighbors could see. Talia is at the dental office where she works part-time. Vivian received her package at home. The documents were eviction notices, but not the ones you'd expect. See, here's something I never told any of them during our 10 years together. Lydia and I reside in the same house, which she believes we both own, and I bought it outright 3 years ago with revenues from my side businesses. Her name never appeared on the deed, the mortgage, or any other official documents. She has been living there as my guest the entire time, ignorant that she has no legal title to the property. The eviction notice gave her 30 days to evacuate the premises, claiming irreconcilable disagreements and a breakdown in their domestic partnership. Completely legal and completely enforceable. But it was not all. Marissa's apartment? It turns out that the building is owned by a property investment business with whom I have been doing web development work for the past 18 months. When I expressed my worries about their property manager's misuse of corporate resources and potential liability issues, they took it seriously. Her lease termination notice mentioned infractions of building policies and possible conflicts of interest with the management business. Talia rents a little house from an elderly couple living out of state. She has no idea that for the past year, I have been in charge of their property management website and online rent collection system. When I notified them about their tenants' involvement in harassment campaigns and the potential reputational damage to their property, they declined to extend her month-to-month lease. And Vivian. Her scenario was the most complicated, and also the most satisfying. The regulatory inquiries I initiated revealed some noteworthy anomalies in her corporate records. Nothing unlawful, but enough to cause major issues with her property taxes and homeowners insurance. It turns out that having an inactive company license while claiming residential property exemptions creates some complicated legal gray areas. Her notice was not an eviction, but a foreclosure warning. The issues with her business status prompted a review of her mortgage terms, and minor technical infractions gave the bank grounds to cancel the loan. By Friday afternoon, all 3 women had phoned me, not together this time, but individually, each attempting a different strategy. Lydia came home distraught and begged me to reconsider. She stated she'd do anything to save our marriage, including break off communication with her family, if I only let her stay. She agreed to go to counseling and change everything about herself to compensate for the Operation Divorce Dan plan. She even offered to sign a post-nuptial agreement, granting me ultimate authority over our finances. I listened carefully and informed her that her 30-day period began today. Marissa called me at 6 p.m., completely frantic. She claimed that losing her job and apartment in the same week would wreck her finances. She offered to compensate me or to work for me for free. Anything to persuade me to cancel the property managers. She kept insisting that she had learned her lesson and would never intervene in my life again. I informed her that the ramifications of her actions were only beginning to unravel. Talia arrived at my house Saturday morning, sobbing uncontrollably. She claimed she had already lost the majority of her catering business and was about to become homeless. She continued asking what she could do to put an end to this, what she could provide me to make things right. She said she had some savings and would pay me every penny if I could help her keep her rental home. I reminded her that she was delighted to capture my reaction for TikTok when they thought they were ruining my life. I asked her how it felt to be on the other side of the equation. However, Vivian responded differently. She did not beg, cry, or offer me anything. She arrived at my house on Saturday evening with a cold, calculated expression on her face and told me that I had made the biggest mistake of my life. She stated her family had connections I couldn't comprehend, resources I didn't understand, and problem-solving strategies I wasn't expecting. She explained that she had spent the previous 2 days making phone calls and that I was about to discover why people in this town know better than to cross her family. I inquired about how those connections were working out for her foreclosure concern. That's when she began to break. She revealed that most of her husband's former business acquaintances had moved away or retired in the previous 5 years. That the formidable network she had been frightening me with consisted primarily of recollections and old business cards. She claimed she had been attempting to project an image of influence and control in order to safeguard her family's reputation, but the reality was far from that. Her husband's death had left her with more obligations than assets, and she'd been struggling financially for years, pretending everything was okay. The company license issues were not simply bureaucratic. They were the final blow, revealing how perilous her situation truly was. By Sunday morning, the reality had set in for all of them. Lydia had spent the weekend frantically calling family and friends, attempting to locate somewhere to stay. However, word had spread about our marital issues, and most people were unwilling to become involved in what appeared to be a complicated divorce situation. Marissa had been rejected emergency housing aid because her income loss was too recent to qualify for the programs. Her savings account couldn't pay a security deposit and the first month's rent for a new place. Talia had attempted to stay with friends, but with her image ruined in the local catering community, she was unable to provide any services in exchange for lodging. She had spent Saturday night in her car in a Walmart parking lot. And Vivian, the foreclosure process was hastened due to corporate compliance concerns. She had fewer than 2 weeks to make a big payment or locate alternative housing. On Sunday evening, they all arrived at my place for the final time. This was not the heated exchange from earlier in the week. This was sheer desperation. They stood on my porch, appearing fatigued, defeated, and terrified. Lydia had clearly been crying for hours. Marissa kept checking her phone, as if she were waiting for a miracle call. Talia appeared to have not slept. Vivian appeared to have aged 10 years in the last week. Lydia spoke first, stating they were sorry for everything and that they had never intended for things to escalate this far. That Operation Divorce Dan was just ridiculous family drama that spiraled out of control. Marissa stated that they recognized they'd made a tremendous mistake, had learnt their lesson, and would never do anything like this again. Talia was crying as she spoke, claiming she was sorry for wanting to capture my humiliation and that she realized how cruel and thoughtless it was. Vivian said they begged me for forgiveness, that they'd all learnt their lesson and simply wanted a chance to restore their lives. I listened to every word and then told them exactly what I had planned to say for 4 years. I explained that everything that happened to them was a direct result of their own choices. Operation Divorce. Dan was not a lighthearted family drama, it was a determined attempt to wreck my life for their pleasure. I reminded them that they had planned to record my reaction after losing my home, marriage, and dignity, that they were thrilled to watch me suffer while celebrating my demise. I explained that the only difference between their strategy and my response was that I had actually succeeded. They kept begging, offering to do anything, and pledging to make amends in any way they could. I told them that nothing they could offer me would change the outcome of their actions. That they had taught me how much their family valued loyalty and respect, and that they were now experiencing what it was like to be the recipient of that lesson. As I closed the door, I heard them outside talking about where they were going to sleep that night. It's been 3 days since then. I've seen Lydia's car parked behind the grocery store, where she appears to spend her nights. Marissa has been residing in the parking lot of a 24-hour laundromat. Talia and Vivian have been using Vivian's automobile to travel between venues in order to avoid detection by security or police. They've been texting, calling, and leaving voicemails with the same message. We apologize. We did not mean it. Please. The desperation in their voices becomes more apparent with each communication. Lydia left me a 40-minute voicemail yesterday, crying and apologizing over and over. But I am not answering. 4 years ago, when I first sensed their scorn and began preparing for the prospect, I promised myself that if they ever sought to destroy me, I would be ready to destroy them in kind. I spent those years expanding my resources, making relationships, and portraying myself as untouchable. They wanted to watch me lose everything while laughing and recording it for social media. Instead, they are sleeping in their cars, whereas I am living happily in my home, with my thriving business and financial security intact. The operation was named Divorce Dan. I suppose you could say the operation was a total success, just not in the way they had anticipated.